So who should be the head of the CDC? Who's strong enough to take on the left? Who's knowledgeable enough about medicine that he's not going to be in over his head? Who has experience being based and standing up for children based on scientific evidence? People often ask me, Liz, you say you don't want Susan Menarez as CDC director. You said you didn't want Jeanette Nishiwat as Surgeon General. Who do you want? And so I want to introduce to you today a man who I think should be the next director of the CDC. He's currently the Surgeon General in the state of Florida. He's the author of Transcend Fear, a blueprint for mindful leadership in public health. It is Dr. Joseph Ladapo. Dr. Ladapo, good to see you, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to see you too. Great to see you.
All right, Dr. Ladapo, you had a major announcement in Florida today. I want to play your video making this announcement that vaccine mandates, not just the COVID vaccine, but vaccine mandates across the states will be completely eliminated. This is your announcement.
But what I'm most excited about is an announcement that we're going to make, that we're making now, which is that the Florida Department of Health, in partnership with the governor, is going to be working to end all vaccine mandates in Florida law. All of them. All of them. All of them. Every last one of them. Yeah. Every last one of them. All of them. Every last one of them. Every last one of them is wrong and drips with disdain and slavery. Okay? Who am I as a government, or anyone else, or who am I as a man standing here now to tell you what you should put in your body? Who am I to tell you what your child should put in your body? I don't have that right. Your body is a gift from God. What you put into your body, is because of your relationship with your body and your God. I don't have that right. Government does not have that right. They want you to believe they have that right. And unfortunately, they've been successful. They've been successful.
Dr. Ladapo, it sounds almost revolutionary to hear a public health official speak like this, because most of them don't. When you talk about our bodies being a gift from God, you make this announcement about vaccine mandates ending. I mean, tell me what this means. Does this mean even for public schools, there will be no vaccine requirements for children to attend?
Oh, Liz, thanks. And I want people to know that we had scheduled this interview before this announcement. Like we scheduled this interview days ago, but it just so happens that the timing is such that we did make that announcement today. And yes, they're completely unethical. And it's just, people can be deceived about what's right and what's wrong. We saw it particularly early during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was always wrong to shut down and lock down. That's always wrong to force people to not do what they want to do in terms of, being able to enjoy the outdoors and being able to spend time with their families and being able to eat what they want, where they want, and things like that. That was always wrong. It was never okay for that to happen. But there was enough energetic momentum behind those policies at the time that not only were they able to be brought into creation, as we all saw, but so many people came to believe that they were the right thing to do. So this is the same thing with these vaccine mandates. They are positively, undoubtedly wrong. They're absolutely positively wrong. I don't have a right to tell you what you have to put in your body. I don't have a right. Only you have that right. I don't have a right, either as an individual or as a government, to tell your child what to put in tell you what you should put in your child's body. I don't have that right, as an individual or as a government. And unfortunately, sort of society's gotten people to believe that, oh, actually, governments do have that right. They don't have that right. They don't have that right. It's time to reclaim that right. That's a right from God, who gave us our bodies, these vessels that house our souls. So yeah, public schools, absolutely, everything. It's an unethical policy inherently.
Now, the pushback that you're going to get for this, and I'm sure you've already seen this, but the pushback that you're going to get is without the mandates, then parents are going to choose not to vaccinate their children in as high of percentages as we see right now. That's going to be detrimental to herd immunity. And in Florida, there's going to be a resurgence of so-called vaccine preventable diseases. How do you respond to that?
I say people have a right to make a choice about what they put in their bodies. And, whatever cases there might be, whatever vaccine preventable cases there might be, guys, people have a right. It's not like, for example, you look at some communities, like some Mennonite communities or, some Amish communities. It's not that they believe that, at least to the best of my knowledge, it's not that they believe that they're immune to every virus or anything like that. It's that they believe that their beliefs are more important than whatever a government has dictated, and people have that right. So look, the great thing about it is that this isn't saying don't take them. This isn't saying take them. This is saying make an informed decision, and that goes for everyone. That goes for people who want to take vaccines and want their kids to have vaccines. And it goes for people who don't want to, but that's what freedom means. So, yeah, sure. But whatever happens, it doesn't make an unethical policy ethical. We need to find different solutions.
Yeah. Like I said, it's not only refreshing, it feels almost radical to hear this from a public health official. Let me ask you this question. I'm sure you saw President Trump's post on Truth Social from Monday talking about the COVID vaccine and insinuating that Pfizer needed to release data about the safety and efficacy of their mRNA vaccine. He said he'd been showed data personally, but he never saw Pfizer release this publicly. And he said, listen, I want the vax to be a success, but maybe it's not. We need to find out either way. If you had 5 minutes with the president, how would you answer the question of whether the mRNA COVID vaccines are both safe and effective?
Yeah. So, I actually was fortunate enough to meet President Trump with Dr. Scott Atlas, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, Dr. Martin Kulldorff, Dr. Cody Meisner in the height of the pandemic in I think it was summer of 2020. And at that time, we were talking to him about the school closures and all the crazy mandates. And if I had the opportunity to speak with him again, first of all, like many Americans, I was really happy to see him, questioning some of these ideas. And I actually had one other note, Liz, which is that I think that the president, in my opinion, and, and his advisors, in my opinion, should really distinguish between Operation Warp Speed in terms of the operational part. Because, it's not like the President Trump was in the laboratory, pipetting, the samples and running experiments. No, that wasn't his part, right? His part was to pull disparate forces together to accomplish a goal. And he did that, splendidly. Guy's clearly a successful businessman. What he wasn't responsible for, and what has been an unmitigated disaster, is the harm of this poison and the harm that it's inflicted on Americans and people outside of this country. And what I would tell him, and I think he would, I think he would get this from the time I have spent with him and just got to observe him and get a sense of kind of how he vibes, if you will, is that sometimes, and I know he's seen these scenarios, sometimes there's the story and then there's the reality on the ground. And sometimes they just do not agree. And this is clearly one of those times, right? You got fewer healthcare workers getting COVID-19 vaccines than the general population. Healthcare workers, right? The most educated population in medical science getting COVID-19 vaccines, less than the general population. So I would tell them that this is one of those times where whatever the studies are showing, whatever this, whatever that, the truth on the ground is that there's so much regret out there for people who've taken these vaccines. There's so many people out there who attribute their suffering to these vaccines. There's so many loved ones out there who attribute the death of other loved ones to these vaccines. That's what's happening on the ground. And that is a failure. And it's a scientific failure. It's not an operational failure in terms of his leadership. It's a scientific failure by scientists who covered up data, obscured stuff. I mean, terrible things, terrible, terrible things.
Yeah. And people need President Trump as their champion in this kind of moment. And he's proved before to be that kind of champion in the face of government abusing the people. And we need him to be that kind of champion again. So your new book, Transcend Fear, A Blueprint for Mindful Leadership in Public Health. Congratulations on your new book, by the way. Everyone, highly recommend that you go and read this book. Through the lens of your book, talk to me about the CDC, what's happening at the CDC, what kind of changes need to be made so that the CDC is actually a helpful organization and not a harmful organization. Give me your take on this.
Yeah. It's all so interesting, and it really does bridge multiple dimensions. So here you have at the CDC these scientists who've resigned, who were, senior people at the CDC, and of course their former director, Secretary Monarez, or I forget what her title is, but the former head of the CDC. And they're obviously all very smart people, right? They've got doctorates, they've got medical degrees, clearly very hardworking, very intelligent. However, you drop a drop of vaccine, like the word vaccine, the concept of vaccine, and all of that scientific rigor and all of that ability to think clearly and weigh data and weigh evidence and be unbiased out the window, right? They can't see straight when it comes to vaccines. And why is that, right? Well, hey, guess what? I used to be the same way. And why it is because many reasons. Part of it is the indoctrination that happens in scientific training, like in medical schools, nursing schools, etc. And part of it is our susceptibility to indoctrination. And that's really where the overlap happens with my book, because that susceptibility to indoctrination, it's why we are humans. It's part of our human story. That ability to be so susceptible is a result of stress, of tension, of trauma, and the impact that holding all of that in our bodies and accumulating it has. It absolutely makes us more susceptible to manipulation, which is what indoctrination is.
So what would you do if you walked in the CDC and you understand that it's staffed at the top, well, I guess now by an acting director, but at least the boss, HHS secretary, is Bobby Kennedy. It should be an apparatus or an institution that has the best interest of the American people at heart, but it's not. Right now, it's full of swamp creatures who are what I call militant pro-vaxxers, who refer to pregnant women as pregnant people, who think that they're entitled. They think that they deserve this position and that they should be able to dictate our choices. What do you do if you walk in as the new CDC director? How do you fix this?
Yeah. So it's no easy task, not surprisingly. And what it really takes, and we'll see how many iterations they have to go through. And I know Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's worked tirelessly for the betterment of humanity for decades. It's going to take a very special leader, because you're going to need someone who not only has the scientific and medical understanding to be able to parse through data in scientific publications and apply wisdom and judgment to them, but you're also going to need someone who has, I would say, the spiritual alignment to be a leader that just naturally can help orient other people to truth and what the right direction is. And that's really hard to do.
Mm.
You do have people who have that sort of natural alignment with, righteousness and divinity and, these timeless parts of the universe and, this thing that we call reality that could bring people into, instill people with that sensation of, what, there's something good here and I don't understand what it is, but I think I need to listen more. I think I need to question what I believe, etc. But it's hard to find those people who also have the scientific training.
Yeah.
And you have tons of people with the scientific training, but they're lost, right? It's like, they're like, oh, look here. Okay. Yeah, we need to lock down. Sure. And yes, let's put little kids in masks. And it's like that crossover, that overlap is very difficult to find. And it's going to take that if that agency is going to emerge to be something better.
Yeah, I think you're right. And what is your take on this idea that, especially with vaccines, because I think obviously that's what people look to primarily from the CDC. That's what we identify the CDC with primarily. What is your take on this idea that the role of the CDC is just to restore informed consent, that if people want to get vaccines or want their children to get vaccines, they should have the choice to have any of these vaccines, versus the CDC taking a leadership role and saying, actually, no, the science shows that it's not good for you to get this vaccine if this is your circumstance, or this vaccine was not properly approved based on safety studies that were not done. We're yanking that. Where do you believe that the CDC should fall on that spectrum?
Yeah, both actually. And I think, I'll use myself as an example. I think the first place they need to be is the informed consent area. Like, that's like, because they all of the credibility has been lost on so many Americans. So there's no point making recommendations right now in that area. Obviously the CDC does a lot of other important work, but in this area, there's no point making recommendations because their credibility is spent. They're in deficit after the COVID-19 pandemic. So they need to start with just, here's the information. Now, after you do that, and again, I said I'd use myself as an example, I do make recommendations about stuff. But again, you got to start, it depends on where you are. Like I haven't, if I were someone who, had lost credibility because I was like saying one thing on Monday, like Dr. Fauci, and then, next week, like there's a different number of masks I'm telling you should wear, then you spend your credibility and you're not in a position to make recommendations. But being able to make recommendations is important, and being able to make, to share your judgment is important, but they're not there yet. So they really ought not be doing that right now in that area. They need to focus all their energy on an informed consent area.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I think people, especially Maha moms, are hungry for some of the paradigm shifting changes, which I think is why it was Senator Rand Paul and Senator Bill Cassidy who were beefing with each other on X about the hepatitis B vaccine and the fact that it's recommended on the day of birth for newborns, despite the fact that mothers are typically tested. That's how it would be transmitted to a newborn. It's recommended blanket, regardless if the mother tests negative. And even if you made the argument that, well, actually, it's not just because of mother-child transmission, it's because they could engage in intravenous drug abuse or, prostitution as young adults, that's not a good justification for giving a vaccine that studies show lead to an incredibly increased risk of autism. Can you weigh in on this? Because it seems like, especially if you open up X, there are doctors on one side, there are doctors on the other side. They both claim to have data to support their position. Where do you fall on this?
Yeah, I think the hepatitis B vaccine issue at birth is silly. I mean, it's really, really silly. In this country, pregnant women are tested, before birth. I mean, that's just one step. You look at other layers. I mean, we don't want anyone to get sick, but as it turns out, hepatitis B is something that, if an adult or a child contracts it, like recovery is almost certain. For many reasons, the epidemiology of it's silly to have a debate about whether like we should be administering that like routinely to newborns. That's just a silly discussion. It's a completely silly discussion. There's and then just to add to that, when you look at the studies that were part of the FDA application to approve it, the safety study was something like kids were followed for 3 days or 5 days or something. I mean, it's just, there's so much silliness in this area. I don't even know that hardly any other countries even administer it at birth. If you're in a different country that, where say rates of hepatitis B are very high in moms, like chronic hepatitis, and, and there's not access to testing before birth, I think you can make a case because, there's an opportunity to protect the child. But that's just not the case in this country. It's like, it's really silly to be having that's not the hill to die on if you're trying to stand up for vaccines or whatever. It's nonsensical.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet that's what the other side, that is the hill that they're trying to die on right now. But I mean, maybe this is a good thing because it's a shakeup. It's a shakeup of public health. It's representative, I think, of what a lot of moms have experienced and thought intuitively, and yet they've been gaslit by their pediatricians and their OBGYNs. And it is, in my opinion, pretty good evidence if your doctor is that militant about the hepatitis B vaccine the day of birth that, that's a capture by the industry. All right. I so appreciate you coming on the show today. Congratulations. Florida is the first state to discontinue vaccine mandates across the state. So trailblazing with science and truth at your back, which is really something to admire and respect. Guys, highly recommend you go get his book, Transcend Fear, A Blueprint for Mindful Leadership in Public Health. Dr. Ladapo, thank you for being on the show, sir.
Thanks. And we got to work without lawmakers, but my hope is that we get there.
Yes. There's things that can be done both with the administrative state and these agencies and with lawmakers. Lots of work to be done. It'll be exciting times ahead. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks so much, Liz. Great to see you.
You too.